Okay, so we have about 100 people in the room, so we will get started. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Philip de Souza and I'm a director at Imanti Management, a small water and environmental consultancy based in Stellenbosch in the Western Cape of South Africa. I am also the co-chair of the IWA's Water Safety Planning Specialist Group, and we are grateful that you are joining us today. Today's webinar is entitled Water Safety Planning, Managing Catchment Risks. As you are aware, water safety planning is a comprehensive risk assessment and risk management approach that includes all steps in the water supply from catchment to consumer. Water safety planning is a proactive management system that ensures continuous supply of safe drinking water by knowing the system thoroughly, identifying where problems might occur, putting barriers and management systems in place to stop problems before they happen, and making sure all parts of the water supply system are working properly. Water safety plans are instrumental in climate change adaptation and resilience, and should be part of a coherent and holistic strategy to ensure sustainable water resources and safe and secure water supply. This webinar will share the experiences and challenges in understanding and assessing the risks in the catchment through practical cases from Sri Lanka, South Africa, and Australia. So we want to draw your attention to the upcoming Water Safety Planning Conference, which is happening in Narvik in Norway. It's less than 2 weeks away, and it will take place from the 22nd to the 24th of June. The conference is hosted by the Arctic University of Norway, UIT, Chalmers University in Sweden, the World Health Organization, and of course, the IWA. The conference will be jam-packed with interesting presentations and workshops touching on key water safety planning related topics from around the world. And the program committee and organizing committee have been working hard to develop a program that includes a mixture of scientific and practical water safety planning advancements. And besides the interesting discussions and meeting colleagues who you probably haven't seen in a few years, we will also happen to be in a very unique and beautiful part of the world. Here is a short video to whet your appetite. Thank you. Thank you. So we hope to see you all in Narvik. You have 2 weeks to make arrangements. You can go to the next slide. So just a couple of little housekeeping issues. We will be recording the webinar, and it will be made on demand to everybody. The speakers will obviously be responsible for securing copyright permissions. And we can go to the next slide. Just to note that you'll see at the bottom the chat box, and we can see a lot of people are introducing themselves already to everybody. So this is just for general requests, and if you've got any issues with sound and so forth. And then during the webinar, the various speakers will be doing their presentations, and then you can pose questions to them. Please use the Q&A box for that exclusively. We won't be answering any questions that you put into the chat box. Okay, so now I think we can go over to the business of the day. You can see we'll first have Asoka Jayaratna from Australia. He will provide a brief overview of typical water safety planning requirements, and then we will jump into 3 case studies, one from Sri Lanka, then from South Africa, and then from Australia. And then we will have a Q&A panel discussion, and then Asoka will close for us. Next, please. So these are the various panelists and myself as the moderator, and we are glad that you have joined us today. Next, please. Okay, so the learning objectives of today, firstly, is to learn about some best practices that utilities are applying to manage development and implementation of water safety plans, to identify the needs and requirements for successfully implementing water safety planning activities, and then to make sure that within the catchment we are looking after the interests of all stakeholders. So we want to hear about success stories that encourage water safety plan managers to tackle the challenges of catchment assessments. So now, without further ado, I want to introduce you to Asoka Jayaratna. Before we move on to that, you can also obviously share your thoughts on social media. You can see there the tag for IWA headquarters. Okay, so I want to hand over to my colleague Asoka. Asoka is the water quality specialist at Yarra Valley Water in Melbourne, Australia. He's a civil engineer with 40 years of experience in the water industry. He's a very familiar face in water safety planning circles and has helped many utilities with understanding, developing, and implementing water safety plans. Asoka, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Philip. Thanks for the introduction. Welcome everyone from wet and cold Melbourne in Australia. We'll get the slides going. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is to set the scene for this interesting webinar by giving you a very high-level overview of the water safety plans, especially for those of you who joined who are not familiar with water safety plans. What is it? Or why do we do it? And what's involved? So as Philip alluded to, it is a comprehensive risk assessment and risk management approach to systematically understand your system, assess your risks, and control them, and make sure you are controlling them. Now, it is an end-to-end process. That means it's from, in the case of drinking water supply, it's from catchment. That's where the process starts, and at the other end is your consumer or the customer or the community. And as you can see from this schematic, a lot of things can happen to water as water moves through the catchment. Introduction of various contaminants, and then change in water quality as the water moves through the system. So a systematic approach is necessary to, I guess, proactively and systematically manage the risk associated with drinking water. The objective is to provide safe and clean or acceptable and adequate water to the consumer. One of the key features of water safety plans, prevention. Prevention at the earliest point in the process. So in this case, what's relevant to today is catchments. That is the earliest, I guess, process in the drinking water supply chain or the process. And water safety plans promotes or multiple barrier approach. If one barrier fails, the other barrier works. So catchment is obviously is important in this context. The current water safety plan manual, which was developed by IWA and WHO in 2009, and it's recommended in the drinking water guidelines, WHO guidelines, is the best way to manage your risks and ensure the safety of water. It involves 11 modules or steps. Basically, you need a team of people who understand the water supply system from catchment to consumer. Then that team analyzes the system, understand the system systematically from catchment to the consumer or the customer tap, as we call, and make sure the risks associated with the safety or quality of drinking water is managed appropriately, adequately, and some risks obviously need much more attention than others because they are significant, and if you lose controls, it can put public health at risk. So therefore, monitoring and confirmation that the water is safe is important. So those 11 modules are structured to make sure we meet all those requirements, and we confirm that the control measures are in place and we are managing the water supply as required. Also, things do go wrong, as we know. So there are also guidance on how to manage incidents or emergencies or requirements. So one might wonder, well, why do we need water safety plans? And there's proven benefits. You can probably do a separate presentation on that. But one thing that always I keep in my mind is, as a water supplier, a person working in the water industry, is we want to make sure the water is safe and clean 100% of the time, not when you take a sample. Those days are gone, right? So it's focus, as I said before, is prevention than reliance on end product testing. Here are some of the examples of benefits of water safety plans. Significant reduction in events that can potentially has potential to supply unsafe water. Treatment plant is a key component that water authorities, water agencies manage. So you need to run the treatment plant in such a way that contamination is completely avoided. And of course, treated water goes into the distribution system, and all sorts of contaminants and events can happen in the distribution. So by implementing water safety plans, you can reduce the risk associated with all those components, and also at the end. And then it increases the awareness of especially the water suppliers, because not understanding the water suppliers created a lot of incidents in the past that ended up, some of them caused even death, right? And also, the last point is about preparedness. How prepared are we to manage an incident? So what you see on the right-hand side is an extract from one of the newspaper articles in Melbourne. We had a boil water event in a couple of years ago in Melbourne because we could not guarantee the water is safe when the treatment plant is not performing well. So having a well-prepared process to manage such unforeseen events is also a benefit of water safety plans. And some facts from WHO, a lot of countries, we've got probably 165 countries around the world, and vast majority of them have implemented or implementing water safety plans to supply safe water to the customers or the communities. And if you want to know more information about water safety plans, there's plenty of information in the IWA and WHO water safety plan portals. And so those details can be obtained there. So that's a sort of a very high level introduction to the water safety plans. Thank you, and I'll hand it back to Philip.
Thanks, Asoka, and thanks for presenting an overview of what it's all about in a quick little snapshot, and then also highlighting some of those catchment risk issues that we're going to talk about a little bit later. But right now, we're going to launch a quick poll with you. We've just got one simple question. It should be popping up on your screen now. Is it easy to involve catchment or basin management authorities within utility-based water safety planning activities? So we all know that utilities, or perhaps in your country, municipalities, develop water safety plans. Is it easy to involve catchment or basin management authorities within those activities? Yes, no, or don't know. We'll give you 30 seconds to answer that, and then we'll see the results. We've currently got 150 participants, so I'm hoping that we can get some good participation in this poll. We'll give you a couple more seconds. I'll ask our IWA colleagues if they are satisfied with the responses, and then maybe they can display the results. Okay, so if we look at the results, you can see there that 50%, half of you, have said, no, it's not easy. And that's partially the reason for this webinar, is that we know it's a challenge. We know it's not easy. And hopefully some of the speakers today are going to reveal how they are doing it. It's not to say that they are perfect and that they have a perfect system in place. But we all know that it takes work, and it's ongoing work that you need to be looking at implementing within your countries. But maybe you can learn a couple of lessons from these other countries. So this is part of the challenge, and hopefully some of the case studies presented today will show how they are doing it in some of these other countries. So without further ado, I'm going to then ask our IWA colleagues if we can then move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Jailal Wijasinghe, and he is the Assistant General Manager for Laboratory Services for the National Water Supply and Drainage Board in Sri Lanka. His academic qualifications include a BSc Honours degree, a postgraduate qualification in toxicology, and an MSc degree in analytical chemistry. He's a professionally chartered chemist and a fellow of the Institute of Chemistry. He has more than 30 years of experience, including water quality monitoring, water safety assurance, and with the preparation, implementation, and auditing of water safety plans. Jailal, over to you.
Thank you, Philip. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all. I am going to share my experiences regarding the catchment management and catchment planning and catchment management in Sri Lanka after implementation of water safety plan in my country. If you go to the content, just we can say about that. Just I'm going to talk with that briefly, the country profile, then risk identification and risk management in the catchment with our implementation of water safety plan, and based on the one of the case study in Sri Lanka with the way forward simply. Yeah, if you go to the country profile briefly, I'm not going to read all these stuff, but briefly I can say about that Sri Lanka is a beautiful island located in Indian Ocean with a population of 22 million. We have a water-rich country with that, and we have ancient heritage of water heritage as well as good water management practice start from King's time. And also we have a lot of river basin, 103 river basin, including with minor and major water reservoirs. Yeah, if you go to the climatic profile, we can say about that in Sri Lanka, we have different climatic zones. We can move in one climatic zone to other climatic zone within 3 to 4 hours time. Therefore, we can enjoy different climatic conditions in Sri Lanka with wet zone, dry zone, arid zone, like that. Yeah, if you go to the Sri Lanka, we have national organization, National Water Supply and Drainage Board, which is the organization has primary authority to provide drinking water to the citizen in my country. In that case, we can say about that in our organization provide some 2.1 million cubic meter of water per day to the citizen of the country. For example, we cover basically 40%. Hopefully, we will be going to increase 2025 double. That means up to 80% coverage. In that case, you can see some graphs. The photographs with the coverage area, and 2025 it might increase somewhere into this. And also we can say about that we are operating somewhere about that we are operating water treatment plants, 302 water treatment plants, including 357 water supply schemes. Most of the water supply schemes operating with the water safety plan concept. Basically, we can say about that 50% of the water supply schemes are operating with water safety plan concept. Yeah, I am going to talk with the sharing of the experience, what we learn regarding the catchment management. Catchment management is a highly challenging situation because it's not easy to manage the catchment, because catchment are the ones where a lot of activities are going on. In that case, we started one of the catchment, the Kalani River Basin catchment. This catchment is very important for us because it's developed catchment. And other way we can say about that, this Kalani River Basin is the river what we are extracting close to 1 million cubic meter of water. Out of that 2.1, 1 million is extracting from this Kalani River for drinking purpose, especially for the Colombo water supply area is covered by this river. And this river starts from the hill country, up country area, and it flows through plantation sectors and goes through somewhere urbanized areas, through industrial zones, and close to the Z. For example, we can say about that a lot of industries, we can say more than 10,000 industries are located in the river basin. And also we can say about that two major industrial zones are located in this river basin. Therefore, it's a challenging situation for us to manage the risk associated with this catchment and also taking the water for drinking purpose. Therefore, we handle this catchment in different way. I am going to explain how we did catchment management plan with the application of water safety plan in this Kalani River Basin. Yeah, Kalani River Basin, I told you that there are many 20 sub watersheds and 37. There are many local administrative profiles belongs to there, and also a lot of industries. I told you 10,000 industries are located in the zones. All these are located in this river basin, and also more than 25% of population is living this in river basin also. Therefore, management is highly challenging. Yeah, then we will come to the risk as well as we can say incidents which occurred in this river basin. One of the common incident is we call about that oil spillages. There are a lot of oil spillages different years. For example, recently in 2021, after the cyclone, we have experience with that oil spillage somewhere close to Colombo. Because of the refinery close to Colombo, it has overflowed their oil and moves to the river. And also in 2017, there are two incidents were occurred. One is due to the spillage from same refinery, as well as other one from one of the bridge construction site where leaking of their machineries into oil into the river. All these situations is we have to manage this. We manage with application of water safety plan concepts, application with the control measures, all this stuff. And also in 2015, there was a big incident with that big beverage manufacturing industry close to Colombo. They discharged their furnace oil into the river, and that also may affect our water supply severely in that case. Same incident that's in 2021. I have just explained regarding the incident which was occurred due to the flood with the oil spillage. Yeah, with the flood, then other thing is we can say about that with the flood, I told you that river is flowing through plantation sectors. There are more the soil erosion will occur in this plantation areas. Due to the soil erosion, most of the sediment will pass into the river. Therefore, sediment is going to the river is another problem with that. Also, application of some fertilizers, excess fertilizer might be come to the river. At that time, there maybe we have calculated the sediment load as well as in the nitrate load into the river with the calculation. There's another, there were another incident in the drought period. The river flow is very minimum, very low. For example, just we can say about that river flow is somewhere 3 to 4 cubic meter per second. 3 to 4 cubic meter per second means very slow moving of the water, where stagnation is occurred in somewhere in the our water pumping stations. There might be a water become somewhere it's bad, quality is very bad because of the some industries on the discharge. It comes to there and stagnation will occur. Due to this stagnated water, some flies they breed there and they made some cocoons somewhere in the treatment plant pumping structures as well as screens. It might be another big problem, pumping of water to the treatment plant also. And toxic waste and some other waste generated from industries after treating those waste discharge into the river. For example, we can say about that one of the industrial zone which discharge 10,000 cubic meter of wastewater into the river. Another industrial zone they discharge 15,000 cubic meter of wastewater to the river. You can see the picture where mapping of the industries, 10,000 industries. The red patches is the high polluting industries, and the blue patches are the one we call that medium polluting industries, and green patches are the low polluting industries. All these industries are located, aggregated in downstream, where the more water treatment plants are located. Therefore, more pollution and more threats are there. Therefore, we have to handle all these risks in that area for to get safe water. And also with the flood, there is not only sediment which comes to, there are some toilets which might be flushed into the river because there are some urbanized area, 25% of population live in this river basin, and therefore E. coli coliform counts and the E. coli counts all are going high. As standard say 10,000 counts per 100 ml, but it goes somewhere 250,000 like that. It's higher value in that case, and the treatment plant operators has to put more effort to treat the water. We have to use more chlorine for the disinfection water. And if you go to the management things, we can say in this management tool, what we did is we have to identify the things in the, especially in the industrial zones, identify their problems and what are the improvements required. Then strengthening and coordination is very important with the industrial partners as well as from the administratives and other water suppliers. All should have to coordinate with that. And also, other one is we can say about that overall this river basin management include some source of some investments is required, as well as some good practices, some good stories behind this pollution management has to be recognized. All these things we are addressing with this river basin management plan. Yeah. Actually, this is also one of the slide we can say about something about the pollution control where in the river basin. Yeah, this is the one what I want to talk with you. There are many incidents, many problems in the challenging situation in the river basin. In this river basin management plan, what we call a Kalani River multi-stakeholder partnership approach. There we have vision and mission. In that case, we need industries. We need economic development. We need what you call the safe water, and we need safe river. We need the safe ecosystem, and these industries has to be balanced. In this balancing situation, we have to talk with the public sector, private sector, and the community. Therefore, we make one platform to work together with the public, private, and community all together to manage in the safe river. Yeah, in this management plan, there are many objectives. One thing is land use management plan has to be there, especially in the plantation sectors, as well as industrial and urbanized pollution control has to be there. and studies, awareness, research, everything has to be there. And also operationalized monitoring, that means water quality monitoring, like real-time monitoring systems, all these are identified in this plan, as well as public sector and the private sector and community all work together to get a good, safe water in the river. Yeah, there are 3 levels. One level is actual basin level, government sector. There are 64 government agencies which are working with river. We all together, we talk with all together, and we discuss with the things with the river basin level, what we can do, what is our plan regarding this river basin management. And if you come to the sub-basin level, there are private sector and public sector work together, and come to the bottom level is the minor watershed level, where public, private, and community. Community is very important. We have to empower the community. We have to aware the community. We have to educate the community. Then in that case, we can minimize some activities, some what you call the environment destructive activities which are occurring in the community level. Therefore, empowering the community with the participation of private and public sector is the public-private community partnership is very important for the river basin management. Yeah, this is the one what I selected some sampling points before mapping the data, everything. Yes, we can say about that. We map that starting from upstream to downstream. Upstream is the where river is somewhere about green color, that's safer mode. Then it comes to the middle side. You can say about that it become yellowing. Then downstream is the where more industries, more water treatment are located. It's a high risk area, that's red zone. Therefore, we have to give more attention in the red zone rather than in the green and yellow zones. You can see about we prioritize that. The gray area is the where the more treatment plant, more industries are located. In that area is we have to more concern about the catchment management in that case in this area rather than other area. Yeah. Yeah, this is what partnership approach, Calendar River multi-stakeholder partnership approach, where most of the industries and also universities and also government sector, private sector, public sector, and all these communities all come one platform, work together to get a clean river. Yeah, the things I'm not going to read each of these steps. Then the lot of activities are there. For example, we can say about that solid waste collecting centers, e-waste collecting centers, biogas production centers, and somewhere there where we can say about that what you call that transferring from environment destructive sand removing things into the somewhere some other activities like that. Yeah, these are some photographs what we discussed in the different scale level with the community people and also the public sector, private sector people to discuss about the river basin management plan. Yeah, there are many activities we can say about that. There are many activities like that. For example, we can say about that there are different menus also. There are kid menus and the urban menu and like that. Then kids, they can do somewhere about that some activities like that, birthday parties without loss. We can say about that wasting of materials or whatever it is. Like there are different menus like that. Yeah, thank you very much. This is the activity.
Excellent, thank you, Jalal. I think that was fascinating, and also to look at the scale that you're looking at. 64 government departments working in that catchment, 10,000 industries, and trying to get communication going amongst all of these, and listing some of those best practices of the initiatives that you've done. And you can see that was a long list. So a lot of different avenues that people need to explore if they want to make this a success. So thanks for that. That is very insightful. Just a reminder on the Q&A, you can please post any questions in the Q&A box. I think one has popped up there already, and we'll ask the panelists to work through that and answer the questions as we go. If there are any outstanding at the end of the session, we will then go take them into the panel discussion. I now have the privilege to hand over to our next speaker, who is Thabisa. She's from Imanti. She's one of my colleagues in South Africa. She's currently based in Zambia, doing some field work. So we're really grateful that she could join us. She has a BTech degree in chemical engineering and an honors in water utilization engineering. She has more than 15 years of experience and has been involved in numerous water and sanitation projects, including training, development, and implementation of water safety plans. She is also a Department of Water and Sanitation Green and Blue Drop Certification Audits Lead Inspector. Thabisa, over to you.
Thank you very much, Philip, and good morning and afternoon and evening to everybody. As Philip has indicated, I'm out on the field. I would just like to apologize for the noise in the background. But what I'm going to share with you today is water safety planning process at the catchment management level, just the lessons that we have learned as South African perspective on when we were approaching this subject. Okay, without going into too much details of what the water safety plan is, because Asoka has given us those details. You can see that it's just basically the risk assessment and risk management approach with all the steps that we have had before. So I'm not going to dwell much on the details of that. Next slide, please. But what I want to just highlight with you today is that we're looking at managing the water quality risks from the catchment, which is much important and something that really has been one of those things that has been neglected or not really taken care of, and what is happening in the catchment, knowing also that the catchment is important in the water safety plan. So the case study is basically going to look at the lessons learned when we were engaging on the catchment management level. Okay, the three case study or the pilot case studies that we did on the catchment management, and like I said, in South Africa, we looked at Limpopo CMA management, which is basically one of the transboundary areas, and then we also look at Upongola Umzimkhulu on the coastal area, which basically is one of the areas that has been had a lot of floods and impacted by flooding. And in Western Cape, which is the Breede Horitz at the bottom of South Africa, the main issue that we picked up is basically the drought. So we looked at different case studies at the catchment to see the impacts really of how the water safety plan can be impacted. But that also included looking at more on the climate change. Okay, these are the three areas or the municipalities, or what we call the water authorities that we worked with at the catchment management areas, because this is the case that we couldn't work with the entire areas of those municipalities. So what I want to highlight, therefore, in terms of what the objectives of these pilot studies were. Basically, the first objectives of this pilot study was to assist the water service institutions to assess how water systems components may affect the climate change, especially at the catchment management area, because that's also the areas which are problematic, where there is no care, where there can be a problem if we're not looking at the climate management. And also to provide specific guidance, which is based on local conditions. As I said earlier, there are different conditions in all of these areas that we looked at. And then sometimes there's data that we tend to, as the local authorities or the municipalities, as well as the catchment management, not use to our advantage to identify the hazards and the risks that are there. So therefore, we look at the project, looked at identifying what are those areas that we need to be looking at. Also improved capacity and technical and operational staff that are doing the water treatment works, that are doing the treatment to be liaising also with the catchment management area, because that's where our resources come from. And we also looked at training the management staff, both at the catchment management areas as well as at the water service authorities who are actually involved in water safety planning to improve municipal efficiency in climate change and cooperating in water safety plan. Then, yeah, so as I said about, we've got the data at the catchment management area, but we don't know how to use it. So therefore, we look at the study that we can analyze that data to the advantage of both the water service institutions and the catchment management area, so that things can be known when things are going to go out of hand, or how we can actually assist the municipalities or assist those that are at the bottom with what's happening at the catchment management area. And the water service institutions and catchment management and other stakeholders need to be working together collaboratively, because what we found is also that the catchment management areas that are managing those resources are working in isolation and not working with the water services authorities that are actually at the bottom. So it tends to be the water service authorities only that are looking at the water safety plan and not understanding what is happening at the catchment management area. So therefore the process was to link those two, making sure that what is happening at the catchment management area is actually taken down all the way and collaboratively and aligned with what is happening at the bottom, which is at the water service authorities who are developing and implementing the water safety plans. 7 is just to improve the awareness and functionality of relevant water partnerships. I think my colleague Jailal also mentioned the importance of making sure that the partners are all involved, including the communities, because sometimes at the catchment management areas, we've got the communities that are surrounding those. So those needs to be incorporated and be aware what a water safety plan is and what impact they are doing on the water services. Improving capacity and willingness of all partners, improve capacity of staff and have effective dialogues, making sure that everyone is understanding from catchment to consumer that we need to be taking care of that and understanding all the issues that we can in order to improve the water service plan, the water safety plan. Okay. In doing these case studies, we had to look at the pertinent question as asking the catchment management areas, as they have been in isolation, if they feel the need or they see the need for this approach of incorporating what they are doing at the catchment management to the with actually the water service authorities water safety plan because of the climate changes as well. So I think we got an overwhelming yes. Everyone is actually acknowledging that this has been ignored for a long time in our country. So we need to start engaging and making sure that we're starting somewhere and moving forward, because the impacts of what is happening at the catchment management at the end of the day is affecting everyone. And the water use license can also therefore be used as a tool to drive improved inclusion of climate considerations. So those are the things that came out immediately to say that we actually need this approach, because that's something that has been lacking. And really nobody has really been looking at making sure that we are doing this. And in most instances, the catchment management area have got all the resources to help the water service institutions down at the municipal level. Okay. Challenges with the approach and methodologies. Okay, we didn't have any challenges with that because everyone was willing, and then to actually make sure that we are doing this. Will this be useful for the municipalities, the water boards, and other water and sanitation sector stakeholders? And then everyone was actually happy with that. This would be useful because now everyone would be sort of talking the same language and understanding that we need to be looking after this. But the most important thing is that the support from senior management, which is something that sometimes lack in progressing forward, because they must see the merit of including the climate change impacts into planning considerations, taking it from the catchment management areas. Okay, and then we also looked at now, having done all this, how we can mobilize support from CMAs or the water management areas in South Africa. Of course, we know in our country, the CMAs and water management areas are responsive for water resource management because that's where they are based and that's where they are looking at. But then when it looks at the water treatment works, the performances then is actually very poor, and therefore once they are involved from that level, from the bottom, and then the performance will then be impacted and be better at the municipal level, and therefore including the water safety plan from that level is actually very much important, and then it was all welcomed. And then to also promote the use of the methodology of making sure that the climate changes are incorporated in the water safety plan, taking from that beginning of the catchment or the resources at the top of the water resources. And then we have what we call the blue drop criteria, which basically assess the readiness of the municipalities or the water service authorities to to provide safe drinking water, and then they blue drop. So what was said by the CMA is that we actually need to look at including and amending this into the blue drop criteria, because that's something that is taken serious, because everyone wants to be blue drop certified, so that if anyone comes to the municipality, are actually happy that this municipality is blue drop certified, therefore I can trust the drinking water of this. So those are the small things that we picked up when we were talking to the CMAs. And also to promote improved planning and budget allocation to build in climate resilience, because we can't ignore climate changes anymore. We need to make sure that it is included. So those are some of the things that we actually came out when we were talking to CMAs and mobilizing them. Okay, and then how to improve information and data sharing, because then one of the things that we also found is that we've got pockets of data. The catchment management areas are sitting with some data, whereas the municipality is also sitting with some data. And the most important data also that is required at the catchment management is to understand what are the impacts and the changes of the weather. So we looked at now, what can we do? Therefore, we can use the existing forums and the platforms, because the weather services would have data, but that data is not shared with the CMAs, and therefore then there's no interpretation and understanding what is happening there. And only effective if all participants are contributing. I think it goes back to that what we were talking about in terms of making sure that all the partners and stakeholders are actually involved, and therefore in making sure that we've got all the people and the weather services also involved. That's some of the things that needed to be done to improve this, because there's a vast of data that is there. And provide value. When I think I've spoken about awareness, and then making sure that that is involved in the water safety plan, because it makes no sense to have the data and not use it meaningfully. And therefore, once that data is collected and then interpreted and contribute to the water safety plan and manage the risks effectively, and go out on sites and do and check and do more of the water safety plan steps as it has been indicated earlier. Okay. Some of the challenges, therefore, that were noted during this case study or this process is that at some points we do not have information regarding flight lines, so therefore we don't know what is going to happen when. So those are the things that needed to be looked at. Uncontrolled activities at the dam, which is the sand and the mining that sometimes take place, and sometimes if people are not aware of what is happening or the damage that they are doing, then it goes back to making sure that we are doing the awareness. Illegal use or obstruction of groundwater canal leakages as well. Some of the challenges that we actually picked up, the dams are not filling up as expected, and therefore it contributes to the unavailability of the water, and subsequently that should be highlighted on the water safety plan. So therefore we can understand where is the water going, and what are the things that we need to be looking at. Lack of data information sharing between transboundary countries. Of course, as I've mentioned, Limpopo is one of the transboundary countries. Therefore, if there is no information sharing between those countries, then that also is a problem, because the bottom country or the affected countries might not know what's happening. And also we picked up there's a need for improved education, as I said, on water resources and economic impacts, where for an example, that affected the harvest, and therefore those are also the things that needs to be looked at, so that we know exactly who is impacted on our water safety plan through those processes. Okay, the plans would deal with climate change impacts on the catchment management areas. We've got various plans. I'm not going to read through those in South Africa. There's disaster management plans and whatever, and a lot of plans that you can get. But now the thing is to make sure that those plans are actually put in place, and then they are implemented in addressing some of the issues, and some of those also incorporated on the water safety plan. So we've got quite good plans in the country to make sure that that is incorporated. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. Okay, so in my closing, basically, what are the common things and lessons that we have learned based on what I have shared with you is that there's a need for an alignment and the linkages in between all the catchment management and as well as the other stakeholders that are involved, and also the municipalities or the water services institutions that are also involved, and also at the working together, closely collaborating together, making sure that the countries also that are affected in the water resources needs to be there's a need to be talking to them and then sharing of data so that we can take that data and interpret it and understand exactly what is happening. The teamwork should also be part of what needs to be synchronized. So we learned that there's some of those things are actually lacking. And then at the end of the day, there was an improved understanding of roles and responsibility as to who must be doing what, because we find that there's an overlapping sometimes of these things, but the most important thing is to make sure that everyone is actually understanding what they need to do. Also, to make an effective change, you need to support. There's a need for support from everyone that is involved, because then we can see quite a big change in the process that we are starting to do. All right. So in closing, the basin authorities officials, like I said earlier, are not involved in the development and implementation of the water services, of the water safety plan, and that needed to change, or that needs to change, so that they can also be involved. No access to climate data or information is actually contributing to water safety plan not being effective sometimes in understanding and picking up the issues even before they can get out of hand. Lack of understanding data and information and how to use it on a day-to-day basis. One of the things that we picked up, we've got the numbers, but what do we do with the numbers? Then we need to be working towards understanding exactly what does it mean now if I've got a temperature of this much, or and so forth. And then also the basin authority officials should play a leading role with these advocacy and awareness efforts, because also they are also as much involved in the water safety plan and as the water service authorities. And those were actually some of the things that came from the basin authorities or from the catchment management areas. And I think that was my last slide, and I will give over now to Philip. Thank you.
Thank you, Jabisa, and thank you for sharing those insights on the South African situation. Yeah, from your talk, it looks like South Africa is maybe starting with a lot of these kind of initiatives, especially when you were talking about the impacts of climate change and variability, and how they're kind of bringing that into water safety planning and taking it to the next level. I think you also shared around the fact that we shouldn't be, working in isolation and trying to work in a more integrated manner. So thanks for those insights. Just to note, we have quite a few questions coming through, so keep them coming. And I'm going to ask the panelists, if you will go and have a look at the questions and see if there's already some that you might be able to answer before we move into the Q&A session in a couple of minutes. So our last speaker is Andrew Ball. Andrew is a microbiologist with a PhD in public health and with 40 years of experience in water quality in the water and public health sectors. He joined Water NSW, so New South Wales, in 2012, and is currently the principal advisor water quality science. Andrew conducts the catchment risk assessments for Sydney's water storages using the health-based targets method. He helped develop with WSAA and the catchment to consumer risk assessment program, as well as he's previously managed many research projects. So Andrew, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. In this presentation, I hope to show what we do to identify and manage the risks to water quality, focusing on the catchment and Sydney's raw water supply, which is a part of the system that Water New South Wales manages. Before I do so, though, I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and water on which we work, the Darug people, and recognise the continuing cultural and spiritual connections that the Aboriginal people have to country. I'd like to pay my respects to the Darug people, the Darug elders, past and present. Right, next slide, please. Just to paint the picture, the map in the middle is Australia, and New South Wales is the bit that's surrounded by a border on the southeast corner. Below that is focusing on New South Wales, and the little purple bit is the Sydney Waters catchment, and that's shown in a bit more detail on the map on the left. It has several different river catchments, and how we capture it is on the right. Now, Sydney is a city of between 6 and 7 million people. Most of the drinking water supply comes from the Hawkesbury and Nepean system, which is the Warragamba, the brown bit on the map on the left. This catchment's 21,000 squared kilometres or thereabouts, and we retain it in 16 storages. The largest of which is Warragamba Dam, which has a volume of 2.1 gigs and supplies about 90% of Sydney's water. Now, many of the storages are situated in catchments that are partially or fully protected, so where access is restricted by legislation. Water treatment, which is part we don't do, most water treatment plants, is done by Sydney Water and comprises direct filtration and chlorination, and that's their main treatment. Just to give you a little bit of history, Water New South Wales, which used to be called the Sydney Catchment Authority, was evolved or was created, it was split away from Sydney Water following the cryptosporidium incident in 1998. Prior to this, Sydney Water, managed the water and wastewater. The incident had an incursion of high concentrations of Giardia and cryptosporidium, which breached the treatment barrier and caused, boil water alerts over a city of this size for several months, which you can imagine caused a problem. The subsequent Royal Commission recommended that the catchment management and bulk water be split off from the rest of the Sydney Water and managed by Sydney Catchment Authority, which is now Water New South Wales. Next slide, please. Water New South Wales has adopted the water quality management system described in the Australian Drinking Water Guidelines. I haven't got a slide in here. The picture on the right is the guideline, and the reference to it is in the notes pages when you look at it. One of the fundamental principles used is the multi-barrier approach, which other speakers have talked about already. Next slide, please. Now, the multi-barrier approach, the Australian Drinking Water Guidelines advocates managing water quality by identifying hazards and controls at each barrier within the water supply system. This includes catchment, storages, and treatment. Water quality in Sydney is managed jointly between Water New South Wales, as I said, that manages the catchment storages to the raw water offtake. Sydney Water, which manages the treatment and distribution to customers, and the process is overseen by New South Wales Health. So the most important thing for us is knowing what hazards are present in the catchment and how much and where. And we do this by conducting a sanitary survey, which looks at diffuse and point sources. And the risks from these hazards are assessed at the raw water offtake, after treatment, and at the custody delivery point. So we look at the risks at 3 points. And we do this using a thing called the Catchment to Customer Risk Assessment, which I'll touch on later. We also developed a thing called PSAT, or the Pollution Source Assessment Tool, to assess 4 priority pollutants, these being nitrogen, phosphorus, suspended solids, and pathogens, primarily Giardia and cryptosporidium. And this is based on and mapped at the drainage unit level, so it's a very fine scale. Assimilating the overall risk to the sub-catchment or catchment level is used to focus catchment management efforts on the highest risk locations, which allows us to target, the most important ones. The picture there is just a diagram showing the various modules that go into this, that go behind the PSAT. Looking at different types of land use and types of pollution. They're dealt with separately for the 4 major pollutants. And there's a scientific evidence base behind PSAP. It's a GIS-based tool that estimates the risk from the key hazards within the catchments. The assessment is made using catchment information for diffuse and point sources, also scientific knowledge from the literature, and water quality monitoring data from the catchment and storage sites. And all comes together to form a map, which you'll see on the next slide. The output map's showing priority drainage units. This is just a small section. The one on the right is a small section of this. The four on the left are the Warragamba catchment and its various subcatchments. And the output shows priority drainage units for in this case, for grazing for each pollutant. And the four pollutants there you see phosphorus, nitrogen, pathogens, and suspended solids, and they are in different places, as you perhaps would expect. PSAP helps us understand the relative risk of the sources, where they are located, and the priority pollutants to inform the strategic implementation of catchment intervention programs, which there are quite a lot. Next slide, please. Now, we actively manage point sources and diffuse sources and storages, and we do this slightly separately. So I'll just go through each one. And the point sources are mostly sewage treatment plants, human pollution, in other words, and intensive animal production, in our case, mainly a few dairy farms. How the programs that we have, and this is in part with the local land authorities and councils and landowners, are upgrading sewage treatment plants. We paid for these upgrades some 20 or so years ago, or no, almost 20 years ago. We managed by being notified of sewage overflows and partial bypasses, and the authorities that have those let us know so that we can take a close eye on it, keep a close eye on it, and take remedial action where we need it. We've got a pretty extensive monitoring program, both grab samples and telemetered probes. And we also have quite a lot of houses within the catchment, the farmhouses and so forth, that have their own sewage septic tanks. So we have a program of helping and inspecting that. In terms of the dairy farms, we have established dairy shed effluent ponds to capture the cow poo and make it so it doesn't go straight in the creek. This is retained and irrigated when it's drier and away from streams. Otherwise, it all goes into the stream, of course. And calf rearing management, we try and keep the calves, in consultation with the farmers, of course, away from the streams. Cows being they've got a much higher concentration of cryptosporidium, so we try and keep those apart from everything else. Next slide, please. The diffuse sources, well, primarily they are managed by part of legislative requirements. We have declared special areas in the inner catchments and sometimes the whole catchments, so they're closed. So we can keep people and activities out of those in some places. But of course, working with stakeholders, the local land authorities, councils, landowners, is of prime importance because most of the catchment is not the inner catchment, but the outer catchment. And so we have programs in stormwater abatement, we have riparian management, and as I said before, on-site sewage inspection and advice. There's a whole lot of background goes into each of those things. There's a lot of joint work with people. Next slide, please. Managing the storages, which is the repository of what we come out of the catchment streams. We do a lot of monitoring. We do it routinely and also intensively during in events, catchment streams, the points where they hit the storages, the various points in the storage and the offtakes. And we do this to find sources, to avoid intrusions, and for long-term risk assessment and trend analysis. See what's going to be coming in the future. We have vertical profilers and SCADA telemetry, so we can look at a lot of water quality in real time. And primarily this in the storages is to avoid intrusions of dirty water. Now on the right, you'll see a couple of graphs, and the top one is a representation of turbidity at the various depths of the storage. The right-hand side is the present time, and towards the left is some days ago. And you can see on the graph at the bottom, this comes in with heavy rain. And what you can see is that red plume there is where turbidity is washed in through the storm events. Those horizontal black lines halfway down are the positions of the offtake. So when we see stuff coming, we try and avoid it. So as you can see on the right-hand side, the offtakes have been lowered to avoid the worst of the water. Now, I mentioned before about the catchment to customer risk assessment. You can't read this, but the main thing here is that the risks from the hazards are assessed for each of the supplies, for each of the hazards and hazard events, at the raw water offtake, which is the left-hand set of coloured bits, after the treatment, which is the middle one, and after the customer delivery point, which is the end, is the right-hand side one, using the C2C risk assessment. This also enables the issues with the highest risk to be targeted, and it's quite a useful tool, if a little difficult to manage. Next slide, please. The challenges, and we certainly have them, as people might imagine, increased population and urbanisation. So more people need more water, and more people are trying to get into the catchment to make it worth for us. Not deliberately, but that's the effect of it. So there's a lot of pressure for recreational access, which in our protected catchments, which we are continually trying to abate. Increasing extreme events, climate change driven. You've heard of the fires and floods we had in Australia in the last couple of years. These increase the natural organic matter, which causes filtration problems and the development of disinfectant byproducts after pollination. And the nutrients that wash in, and either with the ash and also with just normal runoff, cause cyanobacterial blooms, which are getting worse as time progresses. We also keep an eye on emerging hazards. You'll have heard of PFAS and microplastics. Whether you've heard of BMA, I don't know, but it's a thing which is suspected to cause motor neurone disease. And we keep an eye on these and other things as they emerge. And if they become real, we put them into the catchment customer assessment. And lastly, probably quantifying the benefits of catchment management. We know what, everything we do in the catchment helps. The more fences to keep cows out of the lakes, the better. But it's difficult to quantify how much benefit that is, and that's also a continual challenge, mainly for funding for the programs. And next slide, please. The last slide. Protecting and managing a catchment is the fundamental to the provision of safe drinking water. That's what our organisation is all about. Over the past 20 years, Water New South Wales has developed a strong scientific knowledge and understanding of the risks to water quality science in Sydney drinking water catchment. And based on this foundation, we've established 6 key priorities for the source water protection into the future. And I'll let you read those yourself. And while you're doing so, thank you.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Another fascinating presentation, and highlighting again that you need this strong scientific knowledge base, how over the years you have started to understand the varying kind of risks that are present within your catchment, but then also that there are these new and emerging risks that you also need to take into account and make sure that you're bringing that in, combined with challenges of urbanization and growing population. And then also, by the way, we still need to make sure that we're motivating and explaining to funders why all of this is important. And that comes back to what Ahsoka was talking about. We want to move as far upstream as possible in that multi-barrier approach, because otherwise things get a lot more expensive downstream. But it's difficult. It's difficult to motivate for all of this, and there's these obvious challenges. So thanks once more. Fascinating presentation. We're now going to move into the panel discussion. There have been a number of questions posed to the panelists. I think we are going to kick off. I see some of them have been answered already. I'm going to kick off the first one to Jalal. and this is from Bonani. He's asking, you spoke about, getting the communities involved and so forth in catchment management. How do you keep citizen scientists committed that they will continue, to engage and monitor and so forth? Are you able to answer that?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Actually, in the community level, for example, we can say in the minor watershed level, what we did is we aware the community and we make them as a vigilant group. If some pollution occurs somewhere, just they can inform to the other authorities to prevent that. And also we aware the importance of water safety and the water quality maintenance, and also we ask them to move in from environment destructive activities into the environment constructive activities. Like some people, they doing some activities like sand getting out, sand mining or something like that, then we can ask them to go for some ecological important things, like some other activities like ecological print, things like that. Those are the things what we did. And also we can engage those people to get some information, the activities which are occurring in the minor watershed level. Okay.
Excellent. And while we're on you, is there any tactics, or how would you approach, for example, making sure that farmers are engaged? How do you get industries engaged? I think what we're seeing here from the audience is how do you make sure that these other parties are all kind of engaged properly? I know it's a challenge, but some of the things that you have done in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, actually, there are a lot of industries located in the river basin. In that case, we can organize some what we call the sessions in different levels. We can because there are industries, they like to keep the river in very clean in that area. In that case, they would like to fund to do some activities in that area. For example, if some of the industries, they are funding for installation of some monitoring systems. Some of them want to keep at that area, then we can allocate that area for them. You can manage this area like that. We will be going like that.
Okay? Excellent. Thank you. We've got a question here from Jehan, and I think maybe Asoka, you might be one of the best people to answer this. Under COVID-19, how did you control the risks and uncertainties of microbial outbreak? Can you perhaps share some experiences from Yarra Valley Water?
Yes, that's an excellent question. And I think we ran a whole webinar a few months ago or last year on managing risks during COVID. So basically in Australia, we have a very structured approach to managing incidents and emergencies, right? So there's a structure. Having a structure in place is the most important thing. Otherwise, you wouldn't know what you're going to do when you are on the hot seat. So we have a very well-defined state level structure. I'm talking about Victoria, where I live in, and Andrews in New South Wales, very similar, and involving all the agencies. So we basically swung into action and activated those emergency and incident management protocols. Now, COVID is something that we've never experienced, but we always had, for example, our laboratory had a pandemic plan, because we get, a flu season, you get tens of thousands of flu cases, similar to, I guess, COVID. So we had some sort of preparations, and and then we also have what we call business continuity plans. So all those plans are not just plans sitting in a shelf, right? So we had it was easier for us to, in a way, to mobilize those incident management teams. And we had an incident management team at Yarra started at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, and it went for literally more than 12 months until we were comfortable. So So we wanted to make the business as usual. So what we did was we then quickly did what we call a rapid risk assessment, right? So to identify what are the things we can not do during this pandemic. Can we not do A, B, C, D? So we decided, yes, these are the things we can do, we cannot do. And what happens if all our laboratory staff get sick? How do you take a sample? Or how do you source treatment chemicals? So teams and teams were working on a very structured way. And we were very fortunate in a way some of the treatment chemicals like hypochlorites and manufactured in Victoria for us. At the time, we didn't have run into trouble, but then so then that's part of it. But we also, we were not perfect. We learned lessons from the gaps we had in our process, and we improved our emergency management structures.
Excellent, thank you. The next question, it's Bonani Tabisa is saying that you've given a good outline of problematic issues in South Africa, but I think he's based in South Africa and he's asking, where can we find the results of the case studies? Are they already available, or when will they be published? Do you want to answer that? I think Tabisa's dropped off. Okay, we'll then perhaps move on to Andrew. There was a question here, and I'm not picking on you, but you mentioned microplastics as a kind of new and emerging threat. The question here is around how do you measure the quantity of those hazardous materials, the microplastics, and how do you then deal with it? What are some of the issues you are dealing with at the moment, and how are you dealing with them? Thanks.
Well, yeah, okay. Well, with microplastics, there's yet to be good evidence that they're causing a health problem from water, for a start. There are not very good methods, although they're getting better. And there's absolutely no point in testing it, in our belief, until we've got a proper method that actually does what it's supposed to do, and we know what sort of threshold to look at. Otherwise, you find 2 bits of plastic in water and everybody freaks out, and actually it doesn't do any harm, and we're not prepared to take that risk. When it becomes a tangible threat, we are doing some background on this, but when it becomes a tangible threat, we'll have a method that's able to do what we need to do, and a threshold to say, yes, we're meeting it, or no, we're not. But until then, we're keeping tabs on it, but it's really still emerging, that one. I'm not saying it's never going to be a threat. I think it probably will be in the end, but we need more evidence.
Yeah. Okay, so evidence-based. Excellent, thank you. Okay, so the next question, and I think this could be directed at any one of the panelists, so hopefully we've got somebody brave enough to put up their hand. It's from Rory, and Rory says, how can we effectively inspect catchments that cover very large geographical areas to identify risk? Do participants have experience of using technology to assist, so satellite imagery or drones? And then what are some of the limitations of these approaches versus, having boots on the ground, so actually walking around? So I'm going to open the floor to any of the panelists if you want to tackle that. I think you all deal with quite large catchment areas, so you can all probably contribute. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll have a go at it. The first cut we do is based on the information we have. So it's what the land uses are, what the terrain's like, what's in, what sort of things are in the catchment. And you can do a lot from just that, but you can't, it's not going to be perfect by any means by doing that. And you've got to really, in my experience, you've got to have boots on the ground to verify some of this stuff. You might have somebody that says, okay, we've got, fencing that keeps stuff out, and then you find out when you look that, well, actually they do, but it's only about 1% of what their property is. So you take it with a grain of salt. You need to have a look at that. Yes, you can use drones. Yes, you can use satellite imagery. We use it for ground cover, which is a good indicator of particle, turbidity and suspended solids runoff, for example. People are starting to use imagery for looking at algal blooms, cyanobacterial blooms, and it's getting more and more refined as time goes on. Clouds are a bit of a problem sometimes. Yeah. But yes, look, there's nothing really replace. You can't look at over the whole catchment. You can identify you can see what you need to look at when you look at what's in the catchment, and you can focus on those bits when you do the bits on the ground stuff. Yeah, that's how I do it.
Great. No, thank you. I think Alabatu, he had a very similar question. So I think we've covered that. Jalal, do you want to contribute? Ahsoka, do you want to add to that same question? How do you cover the entire catchment area? Boots on the ground, satellites, drones, all of the above? Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be very similar to what Andrew was saying. So, in Australia, this is the approach, and then we do then focus on sanitary surveys, where we need to go, and you can't walk through the catchment, from A to B. So it's very big catchments, identify, so use available technology, and then I guess focus on, this area we need to go and have a look at it. So you do need to have the boots on the ground, and we do that. I know Melbourne Water does that in Melbourne catchments, and we have a very good understanding of where the problems are. But it's an evolving thing. It's we're not perfect. It's a lot of techniques being used, but yeah, having access to good maps, like to start with, especially in sort of middle low income settings. The information's there, but they are scattered everywhere. So, it's gathering all the information, getting that access to those information from multiple agencies is the challenge. Once you got that, then you can use other means, satellite imagery. These days you got, Google Maps, if you don't have anything. But, we are sort of in a much better place that we can do both, and then we map them. So, when you walk, you map. So basically everything is mapped, and then you go into the office and what you've done on the day is mapped. And then all your assessments are in the software that or tools the catchment managers use.
Excellent, thank you. Perhaps this is again directed at all the panelists. We're trying to understand what parameters or determinants do you need to measure to indicate the risk in that watershed? What are the typical parameters or determinants that you are measuring, which gives you an understanding of the risks within your watershed? Again, that should be applicable to all the panelists.
Sorry, I was typing another answer. I didn't hear what you were saying.
Yes, so basically, we just want to check in terms of how do you actually, or what parameters or determinants do you typically measure that gives you an idea of risk in the watershed within the basin or the catchment area? You mean
in terms of water quality?
Yeah.
Well, it depends on on the hazard, doesn't it? I mean, we have a treatment which is largely based on filtering out particles, including pathogens, and so you monitor turbidity to make sure that your treatment process can cope with that. If there is a challenge from some heavy metals, say, you're monitoring heavy metals, they may not be related to anything else but what you're monitoring. So everything that we need to avoid, we have thresholds for, and we can monitor for. And when events happen, if there's a flood in the catchment, mostly it's cow poo and soil washing into and nutrients washing into the lakes, which they're coming from the landscape mostly. If you to get something that might be some sort of obscure chemical hazard, you would need some sort of incident, some sort of accident, a truck falling over and leaking into the water. And we hear about those. I mean, they get notified very, very quickly, and teams are sent out to stop it getting to the water where it all possible. I haven't seen one of those since I've been here, where it's actually got into the water, or to any reasonable degree anyway. But there would be, there are management plans and emergency protocols that come into place to deal with them. But it depends on the hazard you're looking at, really. You can't just say there's no one answer to this.
So again, using the available information to determine what the optimum parameter is, and then as you mentioned around, if there's an incident, we obviously need to review it and refine it and make sure it's still applicable. Ladies and gentlemen, we are running out of time. We still have unanswered questions, but not to worry. Those will be covered by our panelists, and there will be a Q&A report that will be developed and shared at a later stage. I'm going to hand over to Asoka, and he's going to wrap up the session for us. Over to you, Asoka.
Oh, thanks, Philip. First of all, thank you very much to the speakers, panelists, who gave us some contrasting, I guess, aspects of catchment management. We heard from Jalal, how challenging managing a catchment with lots of developments, industries, agriculture, irrigation, heavy industries, and then having, I guess, a partnership, trying to work with the, if you call them polluters, but industries, just farmers, people who live in the catchment, and engaging them, because you have to make a start somewhere in a catchment like that, and that's very common in a lot of countries. So that's working together to whilst trying to understand the high risk areas. And then from Tabisha, I think we heard the importance of catchment management authorities, management buy-in to I guess get into managing catchments. It's a huge task. Working together, not just water agencies, but others who are other stakeholders. And also, I think Tabisha touched on the importance of on looking at the data side as well as climate considerations, something that we cannot ignore. And then finally, I think from Andrew, we heard, I guess, a different approach in this part of the world, where we've done a lot of work to systematically understand and manage our catchments. So it is a very challenging, it is the most challenging areas or process of the catchment to consumer risk management process managed in many parts. But what we have seen today is, water safety plans have helped all of us, whether you're in South Africa, Australia, or Sri Lanka, or other parts of the world, help us to start working on improving catchments, and eventually to maybe drive, Andrew mentioned about 2020 strategies, 2040 strategy. So it's not an easy thing, and it's not a static activity. So we have long-term plans in for example, Australia. I'm sure the other countries need to think about similar approaches. It's not short-term, it's not just medium-term, but also long-term strategies. One day, hopefully, you'll get catchments managed to a level that you can guarantee the water is safe, and then you could reduce the costs of treatment, and that's the luxury, I guess. In Melbourne, we have protected catchments. Majority of our systems protected, and we only have chlorinations, and that's a benefit. So I hope we've given you some insights into managing catchments, not only the challenge, but how to go about addressing those challenges in a very using some three unique examples. So thanks again for participation. We got a large group of participants, and hope you've got something that you can, some take-home messages to think about how you're going to manage your catchment, but also, as you can see on the screen, there are a couple of events coming up. So we encourage you to register and and participate in the future events. And thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. All the best.